I am Braden, 31 years old, and last month, I finally closed on my first home after saving for 11 years. Working 2 jobs, pinching pennies, and sacrificing vacations finally paid off when I got those keys. The pride I felt was indescribable. Then my phone rang. It was my parents, and they were not happy. 2 weeks later, I received certified mail containing lawsuit papers. My own parents were suing me for my house. Before I continue this unbelievable story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button, and prepare yourself. The question the judge asked changed everything. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Pennsylvania, in a household where money was always a sensitive topic. My parents, Thomas and Karen, maintained a facade of financial stability to the neighbors, but behind closed doors, our situation was often precarious. Dad cycled through business ventures that inevitably collapsed, while Mom enabled his poor financial decisions and maintained the illusion that everything was fine. From an early age, I realized I needed to educate myself about money. While other kids played video games, I borrowed personal finance books from the library. By 13, I had opened a savings account with money from mowing lawns. My parents found this amusing, occasionally making jokes about their little accountant. What they saw as cute, I saw as necessary survival skills. High school graduation brought arguments about college. They insisted I attend an expensive private university despite having saved nothing for my education. When I chose the state school with a scholarship, they acted betrayed, claiming I was too good for their advice. Nevertheless, I moved into a cramped dorm room and began studying finance while working part-time at the campus bookstore. Those college years taught me valuable lessons about independence. I tracked every dollar, ate ramen more often than I care to admit, and graduated with minimal student loans compared to my peers. My parents attended my graduation but spent most of the day complaining about the parking situation and the length of the ceremony. After college, I secured an entry-level position at a financial services firm. The starting salary was modest, but it offered growth potential and excellent benefits. While friends bought new cars and rented luxury apartments, I drove a 10-year-old sedan and found the cheapest safe apartment I could with 2 roommates. Every month, I automatically transferred 30% of my paycheck to savings, living on what remained. My parents' financial situation deteriorated further during this time. Dad lost his job and started another doomed business selling specialty outdoor equipment. Mom called monthly with temporary emergencies requiring my financial assistance. The first few times, I helped without hesitation. $500 for an overdue electric bill, $800 for car repairs, $2,000 for property taxes they had neglected to budget for. The pattern became clear within a year. These loans were never repaid, and each call came with increasing urgency and higher amounts. When I suggested they create a budget, Dad exploded in anger, accusing me of thinking I was better than them. Mom would call afterward, crying about how I had hurt his pride. Setting boundaries became necessary but painful. I created a system. I would help once per quarter with essential bills only, paid directly to the company rather than giving them cash. This system infuriated them but protected my growing savings. 3 years into my career, I received a modest promotion. Rather than upgrading my lifestyle, I maintained my frugal habits and took on weekend work at a local golf course, managing their books. The extra income accelerated my savings plan, though it meant sacrificing my social life. Friends stopped inviting me out, knowing I would likely be working or would decline to save money. My parents discovered my second job during a surprise visit to my apartment. They immediately assumed my increased income meant greater availability to solve their problems. That evening, Dad casually mentioned needing a small loan of $10,000 for a guaranteed successful investment opportunity. When I declined, the cold silence lasted weeks. Those years were lonely but purposeful. While coworkers complained about living paycheck to paycheck despite earning good salaries, I stayed focused on my goal of homeownership. My apartment walls remained bare, my furniture secondhand, my vacations non-existent. Every sacrifice brought me closer to financial security my parents never achieved. By my 30th birthday, after 7 years of disciplined saving, I had accumulated enough for a substantial down payment. My parents did not call to wish me happy birthday that year. The distance between us had grown, maintained by their persistent requests and my necessary refusals. Still, I harbored hope that achieving my goal might someday make them proud, that they might recognize the value in my approach to finances. Little did I know, my greatest achievement would trigger their greatest betrayal. With my down payment saved and credit score polished to near perfection, I began the exciting yet intimidating process of finding my first home. My apartment lease was ending in 3 months, providing a natural timeline. After researching neighborhoods extensively, I contacted several realtors and connected immediately with Jessica. Unlike others who tried pushing me toward the upper limit of my pre-approval, she respected my conservative budget and understood my priorities. Most first-time buyers want everything perfect, Jessica said during our initial meeting. You seem different. You understand the value of starting somewhere and building equity. We developed a system. Each weekend, Jessica would arrange viewings of 4 to 5 properties matching my criteria, structurally sound, in a safe neighborhood, with reasonable property taxes and good resale potential. Cosmetic imperfections didn't concern me. I could paint walls and replace fixtures gradually. The emotional roller coaster began with my first offer on a modest 3-bedroom ranch house. My carefully crafted bid was rejected without counteroffers. Someone had paid $10,000 over asking, all cash. The disappointment stung more than I anticipated. Welcome to the current market, Jessica consoled me. This happens, especially in your price range. First-time buyer territory is competitive. The pattern repeated twice more. One house received 14 offers in a single weekend. Another was pulled from the market before I could even submit paperwork. My lunch breaks were spent refreshing listing apps, my evenings calculating and recalculating affordability scenarios. After being outbid on the 3rd property, I called my parents to vent my frustration. Their response was surprisingly lukewarm. Why rush into homeownership? Mom asked. Housing markets crash all the time. Maybe this is a sign you should wait, Dad added, or increase your budget. No point buying something unless it's exactly what you want. Their advice contradicted all financial wisdom I had studied and implemented. Increasing my budget meant either depleting emergency funds or taking on more debt than was prudent. Their casual dismissal of my careful planning felt discouraging, but I reminded myself they had never successfully navigated this process themselves. In my 4th month of searching, Jessica called with urgency in her voice. I found something that just hit the market. The owners are relocating for work and need a quick sale. It's slightly under your budget, needs some cosmetic updates, but the inspection reports look clean. We need to see it today. The house wasn't perfect. Built in the 1,980 seconds, it had outdated kitchen cabinets, worn carpeting in bedrooms, and bathrooms straight from a previous era. But the roof was new, the foundation solid, the electrical updated, and the neighborhood stable with gradually appreciating values. Most importantly, it felt right the moment I walked through the door. My offer was accepted the next day. The inspection revealed minor issues easily addressed. Mortgage approval came through without complications. Each step brought increasing excitement tempered with caution. I'd heard horror stories of last-minute deal collapses. When I called my parents with the good news, their reaction was strangely muted. A house that needs work? Mom questioned. Are you sure that's wise? You're so busy already. Dad inquired about square footage, asking specifically about the layout. His questions seemed focused on livability for older adults rather than a single man my age. At the time, I attributed this to parental concern rather than ulterior motives. Closing day arrived after weeks of document gathering and anxious waiting. Sitting at that table, signing paper after paper, felt surreal. The moment the attorney pushed the keys across the table, Emotion welled up unexpectedly. Years of sacrifice, of saying no while others said yes, had culminated in this tangible symbol of achievement. "Congratulations, homeowner," Jessica said, snapping a photo of me holding the keys. "You earned this." "You're right, buddy," I said. "And you know what? It's their loss. Because you're an amazing kid, and they're missing out on knowing you." The initial weeks involved painting walls, replacing light fixtures, and deep cleaning. Each improvement, however small, brought satisfaction. Weekends that had once been dedicated to my second job now involved trips to hardware stores and DIY projects. YouTube became my instructor for basic home repairs. After a month of settling in, I invited my parents to visit, hoping they might appreciate what I had accomplished once they saw it in person. Their confirmation came with an odd comment from Mom. "We're looking forward to seeing this house of yours. Your father has been talking about it non-stop." Little did I know, their interest had nothing to do with parental pride. My parents arrived on a Saturday morning in April, pulling into the driveway in their aging sedan. Dad emerged with a measuring tape visible in his jacket pocket, which I found odd, but didn't question. Mom carried a small housewarming gift wrapped in newspaper rather than proper gift wrap. Their initial greeting seemed strained, with forced smiles and perfunctory hugs. "So, this is it," Dad said, surveying the exterior with critical eyes. "Smaller than I imagined." Mom added quickly, "But charming. Very charming. Are you going to show us inside?" The tour began awkwardly. Rather than commenting on the improvements I proudly pointed out, they assessed each room with calculating glances. Dad measured doorways and hallways, without explanation. Mom opened closets and cabinets, nodding to herself. When we reached the primary bedroom, Dad walked to the window and studied the backyard intently. "South-facing. Good light. This would make an excellent master bedroom for us," he commented, seemingly to himself. "Excuse me?" I asked, unsure if I had heard correctly. "Just thinking aloud," he replied dismissively. "Your mother has always wanted a south-facing bedroom. The light is better for her plants." Throughout the tour, they asked questions that struck me as strange. The age of the water heater, the capacity of the electrical panel, whether the neighborhood had any age restrictions, or homeowners association rules. These weren't typical questions for parents proud of their son's first home purchase. When I showed them my home office, Mom rifled through papers on my desk while I adjusted the blinds. Later, I would discover my mortgage statement had disappeared from its folder. "Let me make us lunch," I offered, trying to salvage the increasingly uncomfortable visit. "I grilled chicken yesterday and made fresh bread." During our meal at my newly purchased second-hand dining table, the conversation took an unexpected turn. "You know, Braden," Dad began between bites, "at your age, I was already supporting a family. Your mother, you, and paying for a much larger home than this." "Different times," I responded. "Housing costs have tripled relative to wages since then." "Still," Mom interjected, "family should be a priority. We're not getting any younger." "Speaking of priorities," Dad continued, "your mother and I have been thinking about downsizing. Our place is becoming too much to maintain with my back problems and her arthritis." The conversation progressed to increasingly direct hints about their housing situation and my supposed obligation to help them. When I mentioned future renovation plans, Dad scoffed. "Seems selfish to spend money on upgrades when your parents could use assistance. We gave you everything growing up." The visit ended abruptly after that comment. They declined coffee and dessert, with Mom suddenly remembering a neighbor's birthday party they needed to attend. Their departure felt like escaping something uncomfortable rather than concluding a family visit. 3 days later, my phone rang at 11:38 p.m. Mom's voice sounded tearful and urgent. "Your father is in trouble," she said without greeting. "His heart. The doctor says he needs tests, specialized ones. Our insurance has a massive deductible. We need $50,000. The request shocked me. $50,000? That's. I just bought a house, Mom. I don't have that kind of cash available. You must have some left from your down payment," she insisted. Or you could take out a home equity loan. The bank would give it to you immediately with your new property as collateral. The conversation grew increasingly tense as I offered alternatives. $5,000 from my emergency fund, helping them negotiate payment plans with the hospital, researching assistance programs. Each suggestion was dismissed immediately. "This is your father's life we're talking about." Mom's voice rose. "After everything we've done for you." Dad suddenly came on the line, sounding perfectly healthy despite the alleged heart condition. "Listen here," he growled. "Ungrateful children who abandon their parents get what they deserve in the end. Family takes care of family. Period." The call ended with his ominous statement hanging in the air. Sleep eluded me that night as I replayed the conversation, questioning if I was truly being selfish or if their demands were unreasonable. 2 weeks passed without contact. Then my next-door neighbor, Robert, mentioned something concerning while we were both mowing our lawns. "Hey, everything okay with your family situation?" he asked casually. "What do you mean?" "Well, there was an older couple here yesterday, walking around your property, taking pictures. Said they were your parents and were helping you with landscaping plans. Seemed interested in whether the neighborhood was quiet, good for retirement." A chill ran through me despite the warm spring day. My parents had visited my property without my knowledge, presenting themselves as future residents. The following week brought more strange occurrences. A home appraiser knocked on my door, claiming he had an appointment. An older woman stopped me in the driveway to ask if I was still selling to my parents. A real estate agent left her card with a note suggesting she had spoken with the owners about listing the property. Then came the certified letter. The manila envelope contained legal documents. A lawsuit naming me as defendant, my parents as plaintiffs. Their claim: that I had purchased the house with their money, under verbal agreement that it would be their retirement home. They were suing for ownership of the property, claiming I had defrauded them. The paper shook in my hands as I read their allegations. They claimed to have provided the down payment through lifetime gifts and parental support. They alleged a long-standing agreement that my house search was actually on their behalf, due to their poor credit preventing conventional financing. Every claim was fabricated, every allegation false. Yet there it was, filed with the county court, requiring my response within 20 days. My own parents had declared legal war over the greatest achievement of my life. The morning after receiving the lawsuit papers, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. The physical symptoms of shock and betrayal were real enough. Nausea, headache, trembling hands. I spent hours rereading the documents, trying to comprehend how my parents could make such blatantly false claims under penalty of perjury. Their complaint detailed a fictional narrative where they had supposedly provided me with cash installments totaling $62,000 over 8 years, specifically for purchasing them a retirement home. They claimed we had a verbal contract established during a family dinner in 2016, with my aunt and uncle as witnesses. The timeline, amounts, and events were fabricated with disturbing precision. Panic, giving way to resolve, I began calling friends for attorney recommendations. My college roommate Alan, now a corporate lawyer in another state, recommended finding someone specializing in property disputes rather than family law. "This isn't a divorce or custody battle," he explained. "This is a straight property rights case with family dynamics complicating it. You need someone who won't get emotional, but understands the personal elements." 3 consultation appointments later, I found Michael Grossman, an attorney with 20 years of experience in property litigation. Unlike the others who seemed eager to bill hours for a complex case, Michael listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and showed genuine concern about the family betrayal aspect. "Unfortunately, I've seen similar cases," he told me during our consultation. "Not always parents and children, but family members using emotional leverage to make property claims. The good news is that verbal contracts for real estate are extremely difficult to enforce, and without proof of financial contribution, their case is weak." His retainer fee was substantial but less than I expected. When I explained my financial situation, having just purchased the house, He offered a payment plan with reduced rates. "I believe you," he said simply. "And I don't want to see someone lose their home to emotional manipulation disguised as legal claims." The discovery process revealed the likely motivation behind my parents' desperate action. Michael obtained their financial records through legal channels, discovering they were 3 months away from foreclosure on their own home. They had accumulated massive credit card debt, taken a second mortgage they couldn't afford, and failed to pay property taxes for 2 years. Bankruptcy filings had already been initiated. Their plan, apparently, was to lose their house but gain mine. My financial records were meticulously organized, showing every deposit into my savings accounts came from documented income sources, regular paychecks, tax refunds, the second job at the golf course. Bank statements clearly showed the down payment coming from my accounts, with no large deposits from outside sources. My parents had never written me checks exceeding birthday or Christmas gifts of $100. The emotional toll mounted as the case progressed. My performance at work suffered as I took long lunches for legal consultations and spent mornings responding to discovery requests. My manager, noticing the change, called me in for a conversation. When I explained the situation, her face reflected disbelief, then compassion. "Take the personal days you need," she advised. "Document everything for your lawyer and let us know how we can support you. Family lawsuits are particularly draining." Jessica, my realtor, became an unexpected source of support. Having witnessed the entire purchasing process, she volunteered to provide a statement confirming my parents were never involved in the house hunt, financing discussions, or closing procedures. She introduced me to her brother-in-law, a contractor who offered discounted security upgrades for my home after I mentioned my concerns about my parents possibly having made copies of the keys during their visit. "Change the locks today," he advised. "Install a doorbell camera at minimum. People acting this irrationally might escalate beyond legal channels." The court ordered mediation before proceeding to trial. My attorney warned me it would be emotionally challenging, but might reveal their true motives and potentially resolve the case without further litigation. The mediation session took place in a sterile conference room at a downtown law office. Seeing my parents across the table, represented by an attorney known locally for taking dubious contingency cases, was surreal. Mom avoided eye contact, while Dad glared openly with hostility. Their attorney presented their position. They wanted full ownership of the house, claiming they had invested their life savings in my future with the understanding the house would be theirs. When pressed for evidence, he produced handwritten notes, allegedly documenting cash payments, conveniently lacking any signatures, dates, or corroboration. My attorney methodically presented bank statements, pay stubs, tax returns, and loan documentation proving the source of every dollar in the down payment. The mediator, a retired judge, reviewed both sides and addressed my parents directly. "Do you have receipts, witnesses other than family members, or any documentation showing money transferred to your son for this purpose?" he asked. Their attorney interjected before they could answer. "My clients provided cash payments over many years. They trusted their son without demanding receipts." The mediator's expression revealed his skepticism. Without documentation, proving a verbal contract for real estate will be extremely difficult in court. What followed was an uncomfortable hour of my parents sharing embarrassing family stories, personal grievances, and outright falsehoods about our relationship, seemingly designed to paint me as a manipulative son who had always taken advantage of their generosity. They revealed private information about childhood therapy sessions, teenage mistakes, and twisted versions of family disputes. When the mediator asked why, if they had provided the money for the house, my name alone was on all documentation, their story shifted. They claimed I had tricked them by promising to add their names later, exploiting their trust and financial naivety. The mediation ended without resolution. In the hallway afterward, their attorney approached with what he called a generous offer to settle. I would sign over the house to them, but be allowed to live in the smaller second bedroom for up to 1 year while I got back on my feet. Michael responded with a single word: "No." The case was set for a bench trial 3 weeks later. As we left the building, I caught my mother watching me from the lobby with an expression I couldn't decipher. For a moment, I thought she might approach, perhaps offer some explanation for this betrayal. Instead, she turned away when our eyes met, hurrying to catch up with my father, who was already pushing through the revolving door. That night, I sat alone in my contested home, surrounded by half-completed renovation projects and moving boxes still unpacked due to the legal chaos. The house that represented my greatest achievement now felt tainted by conflict, its rooms echoing with uncertainty rather than possibility. The county courthouse stood imposingly in the center of downtown, its stone exterior projecting permanence and authority. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived early as Michael had advised, dressed in a conservative suit, with all our documentation organized in a leather portfolio. Despite appearing composed externally, my stomach churned with anxiety, my mouth dry despite drinking water continuously. Remember, Michael counseled as we waited on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom. Judge Wilson has been on the bench for 15 years. She's experienced, practical, and doesn't appreciate emotional manipulation in her courtroom. Answer questions directly and truthfully. Don't volunteer information unless asked. The courtroom itself was smaller than television had led me to expect, with worn carpeting and fluorescent lighting that cast everyone in an unflattering pallor. My parents and their attorney were already seated at the opposite table when we entered. Mom had dressed conservatively in a skirt suit that aged her significantly. Dad wore what appeared to be a new tie, fumbling uncomfortably with the knot. Judge Amanda Wilson entered promptly at 9 a.m., a slender woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that seemed to assess everyone instantaneously. After preliminary introductions, she reviewed the case file briefly before addressing both parties. "I've read the filings," she began, her voice matter-of-fact. "Before we proceed, I want to be clear. Family disputes over property are among the most contentious cases in my courtroom. I expect professional behavior from everyone, regardless of personal feelings. Is that understood?" Both parties acknowledged her instructions, and the proceedings began. My parents' attorney presented their case first, weaving a narrative of devoted parents who had sacrificed throughout their lives to support their only son, culminating in providing funds for his house purchase, with the understanding it would serve as their retirement home. Mom took the stand first, her testimony practiced and emotional. She described a fictional history of regular cash gifts specifically earmarked for my future home purchase. She produced greeting cards for birthdays and holidays, pointing to generic messages like, "for your future," as supposed evidence of their housing arrangement. Her voice broke strategically when describing their current housing predicament and my alleged betrayal. "We gave him everything," she testified, dabbing at eyes that remained remarkably dry. "When he started looking for houses, it was understood he was doing it for all of us. We couldn't qualify for the mortgage because of some unfortunate business setbacks, but Braden had good credit because we paid for his education and helped him establish himself." Dad's testimony followed, more aggressive in tone. He claimed to have contributed physically to the house purchase by advising on inspections and evaluating the property's suitability. He presented a document he called a family contract that appeared to be recently created, with a signature purportedly mine that bore little resemblance to my actual handwriting. "We had an understanding," he insisted, voice rising. "Family takes care of family. We raised him. Now it's his turn to provide for us. That's how it works." Their attorney introduced the falsified loan documents, presenting them as records of the financial arrangement between us. When Judge Wilson examined them closely, I noticed her eyebrows raised slightly at the obvious inconsistencies in dates and formatting. Cross-examination by Michael exposed the first major cracks in their story. He questioned Mom about specific dates and amounts of these supposed cash gifts, watching her stumble over inconsistencies. When he asked for names of witnesses to these cash transfers, she could provide none beyond family members who were not present in court. "Mrs. Walker," Michael asked calmly, "if you were providing substantial sums toward a house purchase, why would you not use checks, bank transfers, or any traceable method that could protect both parties. "We deal in cash," she responded defensively. "Always have. We don't trust banks after the financial crisis." Michael then presented my parents' bank records obtained through discovery, showing regular debit card usage, direct deposits, and online banking activity dating back years. When Dad took the stand for cross-examination, his testimony became increasingly combative. Michael methodically questioned him about his claim that the house search was conducted for their benefit. "Mr. Walker, did you attend any of the house viewings with your son?" "No, but he knew our requirements." "Did you speak with the realtor at any point during the process?" "No, Braden handled that part." "Did you contribute to the down payment, closing costs, or any inspection fees?" "Not directly, but the money we had given him over the years was for that purpose." Michael then presented a timeline of my house search, including dated communications with the realtor specifying my personal requirements for the property, none of which aligned with features my parents had claimed were essential for their retirement needs. When my turn came to testify, I felt strangely calm. The absurdity of defending my life's financial decisions against fabricated claims had moved beyond anxiety into a surreal determination to reclaim my narrative. I presented my financial history in methodical detail. The bank statements showing regular transfers from my paychecks to savings accounts, the budgeting spreadsheets tracking every dollar saved toward my down payment, the second job documentation showing additional income sources. My performance reviews from both jobs demonstrated my work ethic and the salary increases that had accelerated my savings plan. Jessica testified next, describing our house hunting process from her professional perspective. She confirmed that at no point during our many conversations had I mentioned purchasing the house for my parents, that all criteria discussed related to my personal needs and financial situation, and that my parents had never contacted her or participated in any viewings or discussions. "In my profession," she stated confidently, "it's standard practice to know who will be occupying the property." Braden consistently indicated this was his personal residence. If other occupants had been planned, especially older adults with specific needs, that would have influenced our property search criteria significantly. My direct supervisor from work testified about my consistent work ethic, the additional responsibilities I had taken on to earn promotions and raises, and confirmed that my income history aligned with the savings documented in my financial records. Throughout the proceedings, Judge Wilson took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions of both parties. Her expression remained largely unreadable, though I noticed her particular attention during moments when my parents' testimony contradicted documented evidence. After 4 hours of testimony and evidence presentation, Judge Wilson called a brief recess. When court resumed 15 minutes later, she addressed my parents directly with the question that would ultimately unravel their case completely. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker," she began, looking at them over her reading glasses, "I have reviewed all evidence presented today and have one fundamental question. If your son had a legal and moral obligation to provide housing for you through this purchase, why didn't you put it in writing?" The courtroom fell silent. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My mother looked down at her hands. "We trusted our son," Dad finally responded, his tone defensive. "That's what family does. So you provided, according to your testimony, over $60,000 without any written acknowledgement of the purpose or expectation of return?" Judge Wilson pressed. "It wasn't a business transaction," Mom interjected. "It was family," Judge Wilson continued. "Yet you're in my courtroom treating it very much like a business transaction now. You're asking me to enforce a contract you claim existed but chose not to document." The judge then referenced several documents from discovery that had received little attention until now. Correspondence between my parents and their previous attorney regarding a similar claim against my mother's sister 3 years earlier, alleging she had failed to repay loans. That case had been dismissed for lack of evidence. It appears, Judge Wilson noted carefully, that this is not the first time you have claimed family members owe you substantial sums without documentation. My father's face reddened visibly. That was different. Her sister actually signed promissory notes. Notes the court found to be created after the fact, Judge Wilson corrected, referring to the case summary. Much like the documents you've presented today, which show inconsistencies in paper, stock, ink, and date formatting, suggesting recent creation. The questioning continued for another 30 minutes, with Judge Wilson methodically highlighting the contradictions in my parents' testimony, the lack of credible documentation, and the clear evidence that my finances had been independently managed for years. When she finally delivered her ruling, her voice was firm and unequivocal. Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of the defendant, Braden Walker. There is no credible evidence of a contract, verbal or otherwise, regarding the property in question. All documented evidence supports Mr. Walker's assertion that he purchased the home with his own funds for his own residence. She continued with a statement that addressed the underlying family dynamics directly. This court cannot and will not enforce family expectations that were never clearly established or documented. The plaintiff's claims appear to be based on retrospective desires rather than actual agreements. Furthermore, I find this lawsuit to be frivolous and potentially vexatious. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay court costs and the defendant's reasonable attorney fees. My parents sat motionless as the ruling was delivered. Their attorney leaned over to whisper something, but Dad waved him away angrily. Mom's face had gone pale, her hands gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles whitened. As we gathered our documents after adjournment, Michael smiled slightly. Straightforward case legally. Once the evidence was presented, he commented quietly. The emotional aspect is another matter entirely. In the courthouse hallway, my parents waited by the elevator. Mom stepped forward as if to speak to me, then stopped when Dad gripped her arm. His face contorted with anger as he pointed at me. "This isn't over," he said, voice low but intense. "Family loyalty means nothing to you. Nothing." "Mr. Walker," Michael interrupted smoothly, "I suggest you refrain from making statements that could be construed as threats. The court has ruled. I advise you to accept that ruling and move on." Mom's final attempt at manipulation came as they entered the elevator. "When you're alone in that house," she called out, "remember who changed your diapers and taught you to read. Remember everything we sacrificed." As the elevator doors closed on their bitter faces, Michael placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. "If they continue any form of harassment, we can pursue a restraining order. Document everything, change your locks if you haven't already, and consider installing security cameras." Walking down the courthouse steps into the spring sunshine, I felt conflicting emotions. Relief at the legal victory, profound grief for the family relationship that had been irreparably damaged, and lingering anger at the betrayal that had necessitated this public, legal defense of my life's achievement. The aftermath of the courtroom confrontation unfolded in ways I couldn't have anticipated. What began with my parents' confident assertion of entitlement ended with their case unraveling publicly, exposing not just their fraudulent claims against me, but a pattern of similar behavior that stretched back years. Judge Wilson's piercing question about the lack of written agreement had initiated a cascade of revelations. My father's stumbling response revealed the fundamental weakness in their position. Their assumption that family ties superseded legal requirements demonstrated a profound misunderstanding of both law and ethics. "We trusted our son," Dad had claimed in court, his voice carrying a mixture of indignation and performative hurt. When pressed further by the judge, however, his explanation deteriorated into circular reasoning. They hadn't documented the agreement because they were family, but now they were pursuing legal action because family should take care of family. The contradiction wasn't lost on Judge Wilson, whose follow-up questions methodically exposed the inconsistencies. "If this arrangement was so clearly understood between you," she had asked, "why is there no mention of it in any communication? No emails, text messages, or witnesses beyond immediate family who might benefit?" Mom had attempted to salvage their position by describing holiday dinners and family gatherings where this supposed agreement was understood by everyone present. When asked for specific dates and attendees, however, her account became vague and shifting. The most damaging moment came when my father, frustrated by the questioning, lost his composure entirely. Rising slightly from his chair, his face flushed, he had exclaimed, "He knows what he owes us. Children have obligations to their parents. That house should be our retirement security after everything we've done." The outburst revealed the true nature of their claim. Not a legitimate contractual dispute, but an attempt to enforce an imagined obligation. Judge Wilson's expression had remained impassive, but her note-taking intensified. My parents' attorney had appeared increasingly uncomfortable as the questioning continued, particularly when Judge Wilson referenced the previous lawsuit against my aunt. This revelation had clearly caught him by surprise, suggesting my parents had withheld this information from their own legal counsel. "Your Honor, I was not aware of this prior litigation," he admitted reluctantly. The judge then produced court records showing not just one but 3 previous attempts by my parents to claim financial obligations from family members. My aunt, my father's former business partner, who was also his cousin, and even my maternal grandmother 5 years before her death. All cases had been dismissed for lack of evidence, with one judge explicitly warning them about filing frivolous lawsuits. This pattern transformed the court's perception of the case. What might have been viewed as a misunderstanding between family members was revealed as a systematic attempt to extract financial resources through legal intimidation. Mom's admission, when directly questioned about these previous cases, had been particularly revealing. "We just wanted what was rightfully ours," she stated, her voice small but defensive. "No one in this family appreciates everything we've done for them." Judge Wilson had then methodically dissected the documents presented by my parents. The supposed loan records, when examined closely, showed inconsistent paper stock, varying fonts on what should have been contemporaneous documents, and date formats that changed between pages. The family contract with my alleged signature had been compared to my authenticated signatures on mortgage documents, revealing obvious discrepancies. "These documents," Judge Wilson stated flatly, "appear to have been created after the fact for purposes of this litigation. This raises serious concerns about the integrity of the plaintiff's claims." By the time my parents' lawyer attempted to redirect questioning, the damage was irreparable. His efforts to emphasize the moral obligation of children toward aging parents fell flat against the mountain of evidence showing my financial independence and their pattern of making unfounded claims. The judge's ruling had been comprehensive and unequivocal. Beyond simply deciding in my favor, she had taken the unusual step of declaring their lawsuit frivolous and potentially vexatious. Legal terminology, indicating she found their claims not just incorrect, but improperly motivated. The assignment of court costs and attorney fees to my parents was significant. In most cases, each party bears their own legal expenses, regardless of outcome. The judge's decision to make them responsible for my costs sent a clear message about her assessment of their behavior. After the ruling, their attorney's body language had shifted notably. Where he had previously stood close to them, presenting a united front, he now maintained physical distance, speaking to them in hushed, urgent tones. I later learned from Michael that he was likely advising them about potential consequences of appealing a case with such a definitive ruling, including the risk of sanctions for continuing frivolous litigation. In the courthouse hallway, my parents had made one final attempt to maintain control through emotional manipulation. Dad's veiled threat and Mom's appeal to childhood memories represented their last, desperate effort to extract something, if not the house itself, then at least the satisfaction of inflicting guilt. Michael's calm, legal presence had disrupted even this attempt. His mention of a potential restraining order established clear boundaries. This was no longer a family disagreement, but a legal matter with definable limits and consequences. The most unexpected development came a week after the court date. I received an envelope containing a handwritten letter from my mother's brother, Uncle Paul, whom I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. He had apparently read about the case in the local legal notices section of the newspaper. "I was sorry to see the family conflict has reached this point," he wrote, but not surprised. What they attempted with you, they've done to others in the family over the years. Your grandparents, your Aunt Teresa, even me. The pattern is always the same: claims of verbal agreements, family obligations, and victimhood when those claims are rejected. He explained that most family members had eventually disconnected from my parents after similar experiences, something they had hidden from me by controlling family communication and creating narratives about relatives who had abandoned them. You're not alone in this experience, his letter concluded. Many of us have had to make the difficult choice to establish boundaries. If you ever want to connect with the family members you've been separated from, several of us would welcome the opportunity. This revelation placed the conflict in an entirely new context. What I had experienced as an isolated betrayal was actually part of a long-standing pattern affecting multiple relationships. The isolation I had felt was not unique, but manufactured through the same manipulation techniques they had attempted to use in court. The legal victory, while significant, represented only the beginning of a different challenge: rebuilding a sense of personal and family identity, independent of the manipulative narrative my parents had constructed throughout my life. The weeks following the court verdict brought a mixture of relief, grief, and gradual healing. The immediate practical concerns came first: changing all exterior locks, installing a comprehensive security system with cameras, and updating my emergency contacts at work and with medical providers to remove my parents. Physical security addressed. The emotional aftermath proved more complicated. Random moments would trigger waves of anger or sadness. Discovering an old family photo while unpacking boxes, receiving a misdirected birthday card catalog addressed to my mother, hearing a song that reminded me of childhood road trips. Each trigger initiated what my therapist later called grief bursts for the family relationship I had lost, or perhaps more accurately, the relationship I had believed existed. 3 weeks after the court date, I found a therapist specializing in family estrangement and adult children of manipulative parents. Dr. Simmons approached my situation with neither judgment nor platitudes about forgiveness and reconciliation. Family estrangement is sometimes the healthiest choice, she explained during our first session. Our cultural narrative emphasizes maintaining family relationships at all costs, but that narrative doesn't account for situations where those relationships are fundamentally exploitative. Those initial therapy sessions focused on processing the immediate trauma of the betrayal and lawsuit. Later sessions expanded to examine patterns throughout my childhood, the subtle ways my achievements had been redirected to benefit my parents, how financial independence had been simultaneously encouraged and punished, how normal boundary setting had been labeled as betrayal. What you're describing, Dr. Simmons noted gently, suggests your parents view relationships as transactional rather than reciprocal. Your success threatened that transaction by removing their perceived entitlement to your resources. This framework helped explain their escalation from manipulation to legal action. Their lawsuit wasn't just about the house. It was an attempt to reassert control over a narrative where they were entitled to the fruits of my labor simply because they had performed basic parental duties. Summer arrived, bringing warmer weather and opportunities for outdoor home improvements. Jessica, who had testified on my behalf, introduced me to a landscaping group she volunteered with on weekends. Working with my hands in the soil provided therapeutic relief from the cerebral demands of both my finance career and ongoing emotional processing. "Gardens are forgiving," remarked an elderly member of the group as we planted native perennials along my front walkway. "You make mistakes, plants die, but there's always next season. Nature doesn't hold grudges." That simple observation became something of a personal mantra during challenging moments. The connection with Jessica's volunteer group expanded my social circle beyond work colleagues. For years, my focus on saving had limited social engagements. Now, with the house secured and the immediate legal threat resolved, I allowed myself to develop friendships without constantly calculating the financial cost of every interaction. Uncle Paul's letter had mentioned other estranged family members. With cautious optimism, I reached out using the contact information he provided. My first reunion was with Aunt Teresa, my mother's sister, over coffee at a neutral location. Our conversation revealed striking similarities in our experiences. They attempted almost the identical lawsuit with me, she confirmed, showing me court documents from 8 years earlier. They claimed I had promised them 20% of my divorce settlement as repayment for emotional support during the proceedings. Completely fabricated, but they pursued it aggressively. These connections with extended family helped reconstruct a more accurate family history. The narrative my parents had created portrayed them as victims of ungrateful relatives. The reality, pieced together through multiple conversations, revealed their long pattern of financial exploitation attempts directed at anyone in the family who achieved financial stability. By midsummer, I had reconnected with 7 relatives previously described to me as having abandoned the family. Each connection provided missing pieces of our shared history and additional confirmation that the estrangement had been necessary and healthy. Professional growth continued despite the personal turmoil. My manager, who had been supportive throughout the legal proceedings, nominated me for a leadership development program within the company. The program included mentoring sessions with senior executives, one of whom had experienced similar family conflicts. Success sometimes forces difficult realizations about family dynamics, he shared during a private conversation. When you climb a ladder, you discover who's actually holding it steady and who's trying to shake it. His perspective helped me contextualize my experience within a broader pattern recognizable to others who had achieved financial stability from humble beginnings. The conflict wasn't unique to my family but represented a common challenge for first-generation wealth builders. Home improvements became a physical manifestation of my healing process. Each renovation represented reclaiming the space that had been contested. The kitchen remodel I had initially postponed, due to legal costs, became a priority project, transforming the outdated space into an efficient, welcoming area, reflecting my personal aesthetic rather than resale considerations. The most significant healing milestone came in August, when I hosted a small housewarming gathering. Having friends, new extended family connections, and supportive colleagues fill the space with conversation and laughter felt like a ritual cleansing, replacing courtroom tensions with genuine community. Jessica arrived with a housewarming gift, a young maple tree for the backyard. In 20 years, this will provide amazing shade, she said. Planting a tree is an act of optimism. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was investing in a future where this house remained my sanctuary, my achievement, and eventually my legacy to determine freely. My parents made one final attempt at contact in September, a certified letter containing a poorly concealed threat of appeal, wrapped in language about family reconciliation. Michael reviewed it and confirmed it held no legal merit, merely representing another manipulation attempt. I filed it away without response, the emotional impact noticeably less intense than previous communications. By the 1-year anniversary of my home purchase, the legal drama had faded into something that had happened rather than something that was happening. The property that had been a source of contention had transformed into a true home, with gardens beginning to establish, renovations reflecting my preferences, and memories of friendly gatherings replacing the tension of parental visits and legal proceedings. The financial lessons were clear. Documentation matters, boundaries are essential, and achievement sometimes attracts exploitation. The emotional lessons were more profound. Family is defined by mutual respect and support, rather than biological connection or obligation. Healing happens gradually through consistent small actions, and creating chosen family can be as meaningful as navigating biological relationships. Most importantly, I learned that while we cannot control others' actions, we can determine our response. My parents chose exploitation. I chose independence. They chose litigation. I chose documentation and truth. They chose manipulation. I chose authenticity. Each choice reinforced my developing identity as someone who valued integrity over appeasement, boundaries over exploitation, and genuine connection over obligatory relationships. Today, Sitting on my back porch watching the maple tree's leaves turn with the season, I reflect on how differently this story could have ended. Had I not maintained financial records, had I not found an ethical attorney, had I not discovered the pattern affecting other family members, I might have surrendered my greatest achievement to manipulation and false claims of obligation. Instead, I'm building a life defined by choices rather than expectations, by authentic connections rather than transactional relationships. The house represents more than financial investment now. It symbolizes the courage to defend legitimate boundaries and the wisdom to recognize when relationships have become fundamentally unhealthy. For anyone watching who recognizes similar patterns in their own family dynamics, remember this: you are not obligated to sacrifice your well-being on the altar of family obligation. True family supports your growth rather than exploiting it. Sometimes the healthiest family relationships are the ones you create through choice rather than birth. What about you? Have you ever had to make difficult choices about family relationships to protect yourself or your achievements? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else recognize they're not alone in navigating complicated family dynamics. And if you found value in my experience, please like this video, subscribe for more authentic life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.